Right, thank you all very much and welcome to the last Prescription Drug Affordability Board meeting of 2023. It has been a very wonderful year. I do want to say that I appreciate everybody for the hard work in 2023. And so with that, let's begin the final meeting. Melissa, let's please call the roll.
Chair Akil Patterson.
Present.
Vice Chair Shelley Bailey is excused. Dr. Richard Bruno.
Present.
Dr. Amy Burns.
Present.
Dr. Daniel Hartung.
Present.
Mr. Robert Judge. Let me
I'm
double
muted.
check.
Sorry, present,
Oh.
present, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. John Murray.
Present.
We have a quorum.
And Chair Patterson.
All right, thank you very much. With that, the chair asks members if they have a chance to review the draft minutes from the 2015 or the November 15th, 2023 meeting. And if so, I would ask for a motion from the committee and then duly seconded. Is there a motion?
Move to accept the November minutes.
Moved by Dr. Bruno. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Amy Barnes.
And Chair Patterson, if I may, before you recognize John Murray, I believe first I'm grateful and we welcome our ASL interpreter with us this morning. I'm hearing some ambient noise that someone may have. If they could mute that, that may make our interpreter's job more difficult than it needs to be. And we appreciate him being with us this morning, able to provide that service. Thank you.
May I call the roll before we move on for the minutes?
I believe, John, did you have a statement to make before?
Yeah, I do, Chair Patterson. Thank you. Chair Patterson, under advisement from the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, I declare a potential conflict of interest due to my ownership of Murray Drugs Incorporated, which comprises 3 independent pharmacies in Eastern Oregon that have pharmacy services contracts with PBMs, insurance companies, and the state of Oregon. Using the language of the Ethics Commission, because the PDAB is an advisory board that simply provides information to others who have rulemaking authority. Guidance from OJAC is that it appears that at most, you would have a potential conflict of interest each time the PDAB meets to discuss a specific prescription drug or related matters. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, Melissa, you can call the roll.
Okay, thank you. Richard Bruno.
Aye.
Amy Burns.
Aye.
Daniel Hartung.
Aye.
Robert Judge.
Abstain, I was not here at the meeting.
John Murray.
Y'all abstain as well, as I was not at the meeting.
Ooh,
Chair Akil
So
Patterson.
to be clear, guys, we're not asking you to vote on if you're at the meeting. We're asking you to vote on if there are any amendments to the notes from the meeting. So it's just the meeting notes. It's not actually being present or a part of the meeting. It's just saying that there was approval of the minutes from the meeting. So I'm an aye.
Motion passes.
Oh, Chair Patterson, you're on mute.
I was pulling up my notes, so it's one of those both and approaches here. Ralph, would you please go through your executive director's updates for us, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Patterson, and good morning, everyone. Nice to be with you. Got quite a bit to cover with you this morning. To start, the PDAB sibling program, the Drug Price Transparency Program, held its annual hearing last Thursday afternoon, where attendees heard a number of things, including details from the program's 2023 annual report to the legislature, recommendations on how to further improve that program, including expanded reporting of manufacturer patient assistance programs and requiring insurers and pharmacy benefit managers to report on their use of copay accumulators, a mechanism that can adversely affect consumers' annual out-of-pocket cost. People also heard important public comments from a number of Oregonians and organizations and 2 panel discussions. The first one was about the impact of diabetic drugs approved for weight loss. Panelists included the medical director from the Institute for Clinical and Economic Review, or ICER, the local chair of the Salem-Kaiser chapter of the NAACP, a representative from Regents, an insurance company here in Oregon, and the Oregon State Public Interest Research Group. They all provided their perspectives on the new wave of diabetes drugs that are getting FDA approval for chronic weight management for non-diabetic adults with obesity. The second panel discussed what determines the cost of generic drugs and why they can be so expensive in certain cases. Panelists from the Association for Accessible Medicines, from pharma, from the PCMA, the PBM Trade Association, and an independent pharmacy owner from Redmond participated in that presentation. The discussion focused on the drivers of generic drug pricing and how it affects consumers and pharmacies, and what could potentially be done to curb high cost. We are grateful for all those that participated. And we are working on getting that video up on our website, should be by next week, just working on remedying some of the closed captioning issues that were associated with that recording. I will pivot to speaking to upcoming events and starting with rulemaking. Our second Rules Advisory Committee, or RAC, for the Senate Bill 192 implementation of expanded carrier reporting to the transparency program and new pharmacy benefit manager reporting requirements will be on Monday. That is December 18th. Also, DCBS will begin its rulemaking process from Senate Bill 192 on the combined manufacturer fee structure that support both the drug pricing transparency and the affordability board under Section 9 of Senate Bill 192. Those rules advisory committees are scheduled for Thursday, January 4th and Wednesday, January 31st. Relating to our stakeholder engagement and implementation/operational plan development for upper payment limits due to the legislature in September, I have previously shared with you that we had put out a request for proposals, or RFP, for a vendor to assist us with that. I'm very pleased to announce that a notice of intent to award a contract has been sent to Myers and Stouffer, the successful bidder. You'll hear from them directly in 2024 as the staff plans that engagement with them after a contract has been signed. But to that point, a little bit about Myers and Stouffer. They are a national government consulting firm with a deep understanding of the prescription drug supply chain, including its numerous market participants and how their relationships affect program finances and consumer cost. They specialize in researching and analyzing a wide variety of transactions within the pharmaceutical supply chain, including pharmacy purchases from wholesalers, health plans, and PBM transaction and remuneration, pharmacy claim submissions to pharmacy benefit managers, and manufacturer rebate transitions. Many may be familiar with their work in supporting Oregon Medicaid's fee-for-service acquisition, cost-based reimbursement, and cost of dispensing studies, and their work, for that matter, supporting CMS in the National Drug Acquisition Cost, or NADAC, pricing benchmark. So we do look forward to working in collaboration with them. I'll also note that the board and staff have executed a personal services contract with Dr. Megan Herrick. She is a doctor of pharmacy and clinical professor at the OSU College of Pharmacy. She will be assisting us to complete the clinical review work for our drug affordability reviews, and Dr. Herrick is free of any conflict of interest that would impact her work in that process. Next, we will be recruiting for the recruitment for the vacant position that Dr. Bruno currently has, and this is his last meeting with us. If interested, please keep an eye out on our website for more information about that, or drop a note to our general inbox. Again, we want to thank Dr. Bruno immensely for his time and energy in helping get this board off the ground as an inaugural member, and we wish him great success as he joins Multnomah County. So Dr. B, thank you very, very much for everything you've done. Lastly, as I've shared with the board this week by email with Chair Patterson's support, I feel very strongly that we're going to need to extend our normally scheduled meetings in calendar year 2024 by a half an hour. That would be pivoting from 9:30 to 11:30 to going straight from 9:30 to noon. I do believe this is critically important as we begin our affordability review process and stakeholder engagement for upper payment limit planning. Really want to make sure that we have ample time for public comment on affordability reviews and updates on that project. So to that point, we appreciate the commitment you've made to the board and believe this decision is necessary to continue the high quality of work and discussion that occurs at these meetings. Therefore, I am asking Chair Patterson to call an ad hoc vote at this time and urge/ask for your board collective members' support in that vote. End of report, and I do request an ad hoc vote at this time, Chair Patterson.
Thank you, Ralph, for that update. I think we need to get into the next version of our list, is the approval to extend this meeting by 30 minutes. Do we, Melissa, have we gotten the, is there a motion to extend this meeting by 30 minutes?
I move.
All right. Is there a second?
I will second.
All right. Let's call the roll.
Richard Bruno,
Aye.
Amy Burns,
Aye.
Daniel Hartung,
Aye.
Robert Judge,
Aye.
John Murray,
Aye.
Chair Akil Patterson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. All right, so we've extended this meeting by 30 minutes, excuse me. Ralph, let's start this discussion between the board discussion about filtering prescription and insulin subset lists for biosimilars and generics.
Sure, will do. Thank you, Chair Patterson. Board members, thank you for your support, and Melissa will amend and update calendars in our website to reflect that all meetings in 2024 will be extended till the noon hour. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak to this, and Courtney will be assisting me in this discussion. Board members, members of the public, included in your meeting packet, I did write a letter or memorandum to the board that is dated December 1st, and that meeting packet titled Staff Recommendation to Update Prescription Drug and Insulin Subset List. Specifically, as a staff, we realized that a full discussion did not occur around Oregon Administrative Rule 925-200-0010 number 4, which states the board shall consider for brand name drugs and biologic products whether there are any approved and marketed generics or biosimilars for that specific brand name drug or product. And to that point specifically, prior to proceeding with affordability reviews, we do recommend revisiting this criterion and confirming the subset list before proceeding to the process under Administrative Rule 925-200-0020, which is the affordability reviews themselves. This recommendation does come from staff after consultation with Portal and our other clinical consultant for this review process. To that point, their collective feedback was to remove 4 drugs from the prescription drug subset list due to them having multi-source drug, multiple manufacturers, or generic or therapeutic equivalents. Additionally, we have received stakeholder comments regarding the grouping of drugs in the prescription drug subset list to that point. So based on the totality of that feedback provided, staff is recommending the board consider removing the Creon group, the albuterol sulfate group, the Symbicort group, and the Suboxone group from the prescription drug subset list. I will ask Courtney to speak to similar issues in that memo as it relates to the insulin list, and then we will open for discussion and a vote. Courtney, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ralph. With the continuation through the investigation of the subset list, insulin products were also identified to either be a combination product or a generic based product. And so with that, again, hopefully we'll have some more discussion around the possibility or the need to remove the Sequoia, Zoltrophy, the Humulin R, and then if we'll have to have a discussion around the Limjev, just because the other component that was identified yesterday was that one of the long-acting or the insulin aspart should be removed, because it was identified that the NDCs that we were looking at are associated with the Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS's drug price negotiation, drugs that are under review under the Inflation Reduction Act. So the insulin aspart will have to come off due to the criteria that we're removing any drugs associated with the CMS list. So to fill that aspart, the board can consider continuing reviewing the Limjev. It would just have to be grouped together with all the other insulin products under that section. So Melissa, let's turn this to the board discussion to see what they kind of want to do. If you can go back up to the slides for the RX, thank you. So Ralph, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to continue on kind of understanding for the groups that were identified. So we did a quick analysis, and those analysis of the subset list identified that the I apologize if I slaughter some of these names, but the Buticide, the Bunavil, the albuterol sulfates are on the bottom. Actually, Melissa, can you go to the graph so the board can see where I'm looking at? Yeah, it's that one. Thank you. So there's 3 in the bottom 4, and then the Creon one is kind of at the top. And basically what this is it's identifying the annual spend per employee or enrollee, basically indicating that there's not a significant impact. And then Melissa, if you can go to the next slide, that shows we did a weighing exercise against the board's criteria of the importance, which we will discuss some of the weighing components in a little bit, but you'll also see that Creon and the other ones being asked are on the bottom list that impact the number of enrollees, drug cost, and annual per patient spend. So Chair Patterson, I'd like to turn over to the board to discuss removing those 4 groups and the benefits of that before we continue on with the insulin. Or I'm happy to take any questions from the board. All right, Robert Judge.
Yeah, Courtney, just to make sure that I'm tracking, because it's sensible what the memo describes, but the driver for this decision is because there are, in the data that we had, these drugs have generic alternatives or biosimilars. Is that the factor that's driving this discussion?
Yeah, so within the groupings, because those are grouped based off of the proprietary name. There's multiple components with the drug class that's kind of under, and there's it's kind of too late in the game to go back and separate them all out because we have to go back to DPT. So because they're not really significantly showing an impact, and again, we've had multiple consultants about this. We've had other individuals reviewing this with the same recommendation for the concept for the affordability review. It would be harder to identify the affordability within multiple drugs being reviewed under those groups. So
it's the grouping that's driving this.
Yes.
Yeah, got it.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, Courtney and Robert, I would also state it's the consistent application of the 0010 rule. So
yeah, which identifies the bias to be removed.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board or any other discussions around removing these 4 groups? Yes, Dr. Burns.
Yeah, I think that that's a fine idea. I would support that.
All right.
thank you, Dr. Burns. Thank you. If we want to continue with a similar conversation for insulin, and if that's acceptable, we could do one vote versus separate votes.
Okay. So again, back to the insulin products, with the insulin aspart being removed because it's on the CMS drug negotiation list. It was put forth originally to remove Lispro from the drug list as well, but we can look at, or the Limgiv, the board can continue to look at that if they want. Just know that it would be looked at kind of the drug base versus the drug name component as a grouping. Otherwise, if the board wants, you can remove review of any of the rapid acting insulins and just focus on the short acting, which was the Humulin R500 or U500, and then the long acting Tresiba. The reason why the Sequoia and the Zintrafy was recommended to be removed, again, is because they are a combination combination agents with long-acting insulin with a glucagon peptide -1 or GLP-1 agonist, which is primarily indicated for the type 2 diabetes. So because of that combination agent, it may not be as meaningful for for the clinical utilization because it's lower than the average agents. So that was also recommended to be removed, those 2. So the board could focus on the Tresiba Flux Touch or the Humulin R500, RU500. So Melissa, will you go to the insulin slide, please, just to level set? So again, I'm going to open it back up for board discussion. If there's any feedback. Yeah, Dr. Hartung.
So just to clarify, are you suggesting we remove Limgiv or not, or you did and now you're revising that recommendation?
And this is where I kind of need to lean on the clinicians for your advice, just because the original want of the board was to review an insulin product from each of the insulin types under long acting, rapid acting, and short acting. And so if the board wants to continue with that process, then yes, you can look at reviewing Limgiv if you feel it's valuable. If you don't feel that Limgiv is going to be of value to review for affordability, then you can look at removing that and just focusing on the short acting and the long acting selected drug insulin products.
And to that point, Dr. Hartung, if I may, just the reminder to the board is that while there is the requirement for the board to identify 9 drugs that may cause affordability challenges for Oregonians or the healthcare system, the obligation for insulin products is at least 1. So we'll provide that context as well.
And the reason you recommended to remove it initially was this Lumjev was because it has this biosimilar, it hits this biosimilar criteria.
Yeah, for the most part. So what
Okay.
Limjiv is look at it basically from the drug-based product and not just by the name. So it would be a more cumulative versus like with the Humulin R500, it would be identified that there's more of an impact in some capacity for the cook pin than the vial for the short acting. So it'd be like the same component with the rapid acting with the Lumjiv.
Okay.
So it's up to the board if you want to, if you prefer to have a rapid acting from the selection that you've already provided, that if we can continue that rollover, because like I said, according to the information provided, the insulin aspart will have to be removed. We cannot review that due to the being on the CMS list. Is there any other clinicians that have any suggestions or feedback on the value of reviewing all 3 insulin types, or do you want to just identify insulin types for the long acting and the short acting? Yeah, Dan.
Sorry. So this is just to get this pre-list to consider for the to consider for to identify the one product we're going to do the affordability review on, right? I just want to make sure I'm clear about the process here.
Yeah, it's a great question. So this is to identify the subset list of the insulin products that
Okay.
we will do a more in-depth affordability review on under our rule -020.
My opinion is that we don't need to include any, it's fine to remove it and not replace it with another rapid. I feel like looking at this, I feel like there's one strong candidate for review here that jumps off the page when I look at the data that, even if you put another one on here, I would still select this, the one that I'm looking at. So I don't need to have a replacement for Lumjev.
Okay,
That's my opinion.
sounds good. Any other clinicians or board members have any insight?
I would concur with Dr. Hartung's opinion.
Okay, so yeah, Robert.
So for the non-clinicians at the table here, we would end up having Tresiba and Flex Touch as long-acting. And we would have 2 intermediates still, right? The Humulin R, are we moving, or is that being removed, Humulin R as well?
Yes, the Humulin R would probably be removed, but we would focus on the Humulin RU500, the quick pin.
Correct, right, okay. And then on rapid acting, we would have no rapid acting.
That's
We
correct.
take, okay. So we end up with 3 products as opposed to 4 + 2 + 2. That's what we kind of did last time, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Bruno?
Thank you. Yeah, is there a way to put up the slide that we had last month that had a list of those insulin products we were considering, just so I can get the full context here? My thought is that, the U500 product is a super concentrated insulin that's used way less frequently. For more sort of brittle type 1 diabetics, I've only used it once or twice in my career, but I think that it may be it may be used less because of its cost, but it also may be used less just because it has less clinical utility and less need. So it would be one that I don't know if that Humulin R is the U500 product you're talking about, or was that separate?
So there's, Melissa, I'm gonna still screen, and I just pulled this off of our website, and then I just added in from last month, the out-of-pocket cost component.
Okay.
Are
Okay.
you
Yeah. Thank
my
you.
screen? All right. So again, if we're looking at, majority of the conversation has been like identifying out-of-pocket costs. So say if we filter that, moving these ones out. I don't know how you want to look at it. So I'm happy to.
That's fine, just like that. Yeah, that's great. So you're suggesting that we remove the top two, the Sleequa and the Zoltrophy. We keep the Lumjev in there. And then which Humulin R were you recommending we not consider?
This one, because
The
it has,
regular Humulin R. Okay. And we keep the 500 in there, just
yeah, because it has.
so expensive. Yeah.
And then these would be removed. So we wouldn't be kind of what the conversation we just had with Dr. Hartung was, there's really not showing any significance of having to include Lumjev, because again, Aspart will be removed because of the criteria that it's on the CMS list. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm fine with all that and happy to concede my time over to Dr. Burns.
Okay, Dr. Burns, let's go to you.
I'm disappointed that we're not going to have a rapid acting insulin to look at, but I understand, you know, we have constraints and then we have other constraints. So I will concur with everyone else. It's kind of disappointing. I think that that's a really important, you know, group of insulin to look at, but I understand.
All right, appreciate the discussion. I guess Chair Patterson, if you feel your board is ready for a vote, you can put forth your vote. Yes, Mr. Judge.
Yeah. So just a comment. You know, the drugs that we'll be left with, when I think about kind of the cost and the kind of the annual spend, it feels like we threw a pitch just outside of the catcher's mitt. You know, when I was thinking about kind of the drugs that we're supposed to try to get to, we're looking at drugs with an affordability issue. And affordability, I know we talked through criteria to filter on, but it feels like we've got less than the right products in here now. But if that's where we are, that's where we are.
To that point, Robert, it's certainly, if the board wishes to vote separately on the drug list and on the insulin list, certainly open to discussion, and ultimately this is a board decision. So should the board feel like the insulin list should not be amended to the breadth and depth that the staff recommends, so we certainly respect that and honor it. So we leave that to the board to determine.
Mm-hmm.
What I would suggest, though, as we move through discussion with Dr. Bruno, that to have grace on Chair Patterson, that when we do reach time for a vote, if we could ask someone else to probably make the motion for him so that he doesn't have to call upon all of you to assist with that, potentially the clinical folks specifically. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dr. Bruno?
Oh, thank you. So when I think about, let's say, a new diabetic visit, patient coming in with new diagnosis of diabetes, who needs to be started on insulin. My go-to would be a long-acting insulin because that's just easier to do. And we've gotten a lot of sort of discussion from one of the clinicians the last visit about the starting of insulin and how difficult it can be in this landscape. So for that reason, I want to find an insulin that's accessible, cheap, and be able to provide that coverage, sort of long-acting 24-hour coverage for a patient. So that makes me, but looking at this list, I'm comfortable with that, knowing that there are those long-acting insulins on that list, so that we could be able to, me and other clinicians could prescribe that medication for that patient and be able to get them access to something that's more affordable and also very useful clinically. So I'm okay with that. And so given that, I would just go ahead and make a motion now that we would accept the staff's recommendations on this slide as written.
And is this for both the insulin and the prescription drugs groups to be removed? Or is your motion just for the insulin products?
For those insulin products that you had on that slide, yeah, I think maybe we should just parse this out.
Okay.
And Chair Patterson? And hopefully Chair Patterson's not having any technical problems. Are you able to hear us, Chair Patterson? You're on mute.
My apology. Oh, I was family thing just arrived. My sister was getting married, so I had to take the call. So
congratulations.
Yes, thank you. Did we want to take a vote on this at this time?
Yeah, I made a motion. I'm just waiting on a second.
Is there a second?
I will second, yes.
All right. Does anyone, so we call the question, is there any discussion that needs to be had amongst the board at this time? None had. Melissa, please call the roll.
Richard Bruno,
Aye.
Amy Burns,
Aye.
Daniel Hartung,
Aye.
Robert Judge,
Aye.
John Murray,
Aye.
Akil Patterson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Right. Thank you, Chair Patterson. And then if I could request from the board, consistent with previous discussion and certainly open to additional discussion, but if I could ask for the board to consider a vote for the removal of the Creon group, the albuterol sulfate group, Symbicort group, and Suboxone group from the drug list itself.
I'll make
And
that.
welcome. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Amy. Dr. Burns.
Second.
Motion and seconded. So let's call the question.
Richard Bruno,
Aye.
Amy Burns,
Aye.
Daniel Hartung,
Aye.
Robert Judge,
Aye.
John Murray,
Aye.
Akil Patterson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Where are we at? We're on the board policy, approval of recommendations, survey.
All right. Thank you, Chair Patterson. Rec was not able to be with us this morning, so appreciate Courtney and I will tag team this together. Courtney, if I can ask you to get us started, please.
Yes, thank you. I hope this information is valuable to you. Breck worked really hard on getting this information. I believe you all recall that a survey was sent to you a few months ago regarding our rule ending in -020 to kind of survey from the board's perspective what are the most valuable kind of data points within our lengthy rule. There was close to 45, 50 data criteria to consider and to best understand how to utilize the information. We provided the survey and you provided it back to us. So thank you so much. We'll go into the results in just a second. Ralph will go over those. But again, how we plan to use the results is from a kind of a weighing component. As we dive further into the affordability review to ensure that board is providing the or staff is providing the board with the most essential information that will be most meaningful for you to during the affordability review process. So next slide, please, Melissa. So again, there was about 40 or so criteria that we needed to evaluate based off of 20 variations of questions under our rule. And the board provided feedback through Breck, who kind of structured and organized all the criteria in a ranking dynamic, and then created a calculated average rank for each one of those. And I think the next slide, please, Melissa, which I will hand over to Ralph, kind of puts in perspective how the weighing calculation was identified and then what the overall scoring will be. So Ralph, back to you.
And thank you, Courtney. So don't need to spend too much time here, but as Courtney flagged and mentioned, this slide demonstrates how responses were converted to a numeric value to get an average weighted score. And this, of course, is just an example of that methodology. Melissa, if you would, to the next slide, please. And thank you so much. So this slide represents how board members responded to the survey with those most heavily weighted issues or criterion on the left side. This exercise was used in developing the affordability review template that we'll be walking through with you shortly. To state out loud, this does not mean that criteria on the left side will be looked at in isolation. It means that the information on the right side will also be reviewed, but this ultimately will be left to individual board members in their voting throughout the affordability review process if they believe a drug should be deemed unaffordable or not. And we'll speak to that in a little bit more detail when we get into the template, but wanted to share this with you. And back to you, Courtney, please.
All right, thanks, Melissa. Next slide. So again, when we look at the value of high importance, there was a cutoff score of 6.7. So anything between a 6.7 and a 10 score was considered highly important. And the listed bullets there indicate what each of those components represented within the rule. Next slide, please, Melissa. So there was more overwhelming responses that indicated a somewhat important score, which was between a 3.3 and a 6.6. The top three bullets on these ones were actually the bottom three of the left-sided color coordination on the slide that Ralph was just discussing. And these are still fairly important in the work that we're doing to determine affordability. So these will also be looked at probably with a little more detail along with the most important results in the other slide. But again, like Ralph said, it's not that any of these points are not going to be reviewed, but some of it has to do with the challenges. We may not have all the information, we might not have access to it. So it was kind of ranked on the accessibility and the importance for the board. So and then the next slide, Melissa, is this again, the continuation of the somewhat important data points for that scoring rubrics. And then the last slide, please, Melissa. And then the less important only had a couple, which is the potential for a market for prescription drugs for labeled and off-labeled indication, and then information from manufacturers that choose to provide. And again, that will be at the manufacturer's discretion to what they want to provide to support or identify anything in the affordability review. So I think the next slide, Ralph, goes back to you.
Sure. Oh,
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry, Courtney. Were you going to say something?
No, you can finish off.
All right, sure. Thank you. So how we will use these results, make them available to you. This obviously, as we noted, informs the team's research and our ability to prioritize those efforts in the affordability review process, and then get weighted ranking for all drugs. And that construct will be really kind of a placeholder as needed, if needed, and that should, when we get into the affordability reviews, noting we are reviewing more than 9 drugs as the scoring rubric for that goes, that Courtney mentioned, we'll speak to shortly. Should there be a tie, in essence, that weighted exercise will come back into play. Based on the value and criteria that board members in totality placed on their score specific to any given drug product. So that is that. Happy to entertain any questions. Again, revisiting this from our last meeting, so kind of catch up in informational context. And Robert.
Thanks, Ralph. Just so, since I was not here last week and catching up on, or last month, and catching up on this, am I understanding this correctly, that the slide that you showed where the results are ranked numerically, and you had, ones that were 10 down to 5.7 and 5 going down to 1, I think. The left side, we're not going to use that entire set of criteria in totality. We're only going to be using the left side in our weighting and scoring, or
No, all of those elements are in fact incorporated into the affordability review template.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. If nothing else from the board, we're happy to move on to the next agenda item. All right, thank you. This will be a collaborative presentation by myself, Courtney, and Amanda, and gratitude to both of their important contributions to this work. Melissa, if you would go to, or Courtney, you may have some stack slides, if you will put those on screen to start us with the, yes, thank you so much. So for context for this, and this is now the effective timeline in play based on the previous board vote. To that point, a reminder of the timeline for the completion of this exercise, as we've received a number of comments about the process of drug selection and conducting affordability reviews. The board, specifically, we staff supporting the board, have notified the legislature and the governor's office to that point that we have missed 2 previous deadlines in completing this exercise. Statute called for us to have this work completed by December of 2022. Given we had only had our first meeting in June and July of that year, understandably, we had asked for an extension until December of 2023. This past July of 2023, realizing the timeline and arc that we were on with the complexity of this work, we did ask for a second extension until June 30th of 2024. Myself, as executive director, in consultation with Chair Patterson, and for the record, that is PDAB Akil Chair Patterson, not State Senator Deb Patterson, Chair of the Senate Healthcare Committee. Chair Akil Patterson and I are in agreement that we will not be asking for another extension, and this work will be completed by June 30 and submit to the legislature. To that point, we'll say to the public, as we learn from our work and stakeholder input, we will consider this input into the next cycles of reviews. But based on the calendar vote taken, we're bringing the vote taken previously in this meeting, we are taking this calendar forward. Courtney will walk through it, and then we will welcome Amanda to present on the affordability review template itself, and then I'll circle back and speak to a bit of the scoring rubric. So Courtney, if you would.
Yes, thanks, Ralph. And I apologize, some of my words have been cut off on the insulin products, but again, from the vote that was taken earlier from the insulin discussion, the Tresiba Flex Touch, and the Human RU500 Quick Pin will be carried forward under the review. So this timeline under the insulin for January 17th will be updated to reflect that more specifically. And again, with the increase of the time of 30 minutes for the board meeting and only reviewing a handful of drugs, that time will be, more time will be allotted for each drug review. So that 35 minutes is a little bit off. We'll probably add 10 minutes to each side, or contribute more to the public testimony time, depending on what the need is for the review. Again, the cutoff date for manufacturers and stakeholders to provide staff board with written material or information regarding each of the drugs under review for those upcoming board meetings is listed there. So any manufacturers have to have something to us by the 27th to consider for the December 17th meeting. And again, because that has to do with our tight deadline of posting the agenda and posting material for drugs and making sure we have enough time to review all the information to create the material packet, which Amanda will go in more detail in a moment about. According to the vote that you also took, I created the options with the hope that those groupings would be removed. So now you have 3 drugs over February to May to review, with approximately 35-45 minutes for each one of those drugs. Again, with the board providing the affordability review drug packet with the information from manufacturers and stakeholders and public comment associated all into those packets for review. So if there's no other questions on this, I don't think it's worth the value to hold to show the other calendars, because you all voted on the updated information already. Yes, Robert, before I continue on. Oh, you're on mute.
Just a comment here. I mean, it's stating the obvious, but I understand the need to kind of watch the clock as we do each one of these drug reviews, but how do we balance the time that's allocated for public testimony if the numbers of individuals who wish to comment publicly exceeds the time that's allocated?
Sure, Robert, I'll be speaking to that in a little bit more detail with the corresponding memo that is attached in the packet after conclusion of this. So if I can ask for you to bear with us on that,
Good.
and happy to answer questions at that time. Thanks.
All right, if there's nothing else regarding the calendaring, I will hand it over to Amanda to go through the template for the affordability review. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. And Melissa, can you put the affordability review template up on the screen? Thank you so much, Melissa. All right. Thank you, Courtney. Before I begin scrolling through the template, I wanted to make a few quick, just note a few quick things. First, any red text you see in this document will be populated with the appropriate values or information from the data sources. So for example, at the top, you see drug name in red, and that will be obviously populated with the appropriate drug name. The document that I'm sharing today includes a variety of placeholders and suggested sources, some of which may not be applicable or available for every drug undergoing an affordability review. Any charts or graphs on this document use dummy data for mock-up purposes only and do not pertain to any real drugs. With that, let's dive in. The template starts with the review summary, which is a high-level review of some of the key metrics that you'll see throughout the document, just as a quick snapshot of those key figures. The review background talks about the background for the review under statute. The drug information is high-level information about the drug, such as the proprietary name, non-proprietary names, or not proprietary name, and any FDA approval information on the high level. And the clinical profile, as Ralph teed up, Dr. Herring will be leading the charge with the clinical review for the drugs. The clinical profile section will include the drug's indications, the clinical efficacy, safety, and therapeutic alternative information. As we head into the cost profile section of the affordability review, I want to note that we do look at more than one cost metric. As we know, there are limitations and benefits to each measure of cost in terms of what is set by the manufacturer, what does it come to for the patients at the pharmacy counter. We start with the WAC over time and look at how that has changed. WAC will be pulled from Metaspan, price history tables. When available, we will include price concession information for any drugs that were included in the data call and carriers reported that information. We also will include the cost to the stakeholders, such as out-of-pocket costs, and the cost to the healthcare systems, such as the total annual spend and the cost per enrollee. And I'm pleased to note that additionally, we'll also have information from coordinated care organizations. We received data just yesterday from the Oregon Health Authority, or OHA, which we will include in the report. And finally, on the subject of cost, any comparative costs for therapeutic alternatives, where we can do a side-by-side comparison between the drug under review and the therapeutic alternative. The access section, when data is available, will include any data regarding the rate of rejection for the drug, which we obtain through the data call for drugs that were included in that data call. Any sort of carrier plan information that was supplied to us, provided at a high-level view, the utilization rate of the drug, and then any information regarding health equity and potential disparities. And finally, we will close off the affordability review with the stakeholder feedback. In this section, we would have links or references to the stakeholder feedback documentation. Stakeholder feedback will include feedback from the medical and scientific community, from the manufacturers, or from the patients. And does the board have any questions about this template format? Excellent. Oh, Dr. Hartung?
Just a comment on the WAC analysis of WAC. More of just perhaps a suggestion, as because some WAC is reported oftentimes at a unit basis, like per pill or whatever, and so as you get into these, summarizing it at a more kind of intuitive level for kind of a clinician or non-clinicians in terms of like costs or WAC per 30-day supply or WAC per annual cost or something like that might be helpful. Despite its limitation, it is kind of like this starting point for understanding price of a drug, especially if you're comparing it to alternatives. Having it kind of converted into some sort of comprehensible format might be helpful.
Yes, very good, valid point, Dr. Hartung. And so one of the things we call out in the template is that the package WAC, we used it for price trending in terms of the change over time. As we've found in the past, the WAC is not the best indicator necessarily of cost for a variety of reasons. One, it doesn't take into consideration other changes to the cost throughout the supply chain, such as discounts, price concessions, rebates. The other thing too is generally, like if we look at package WAC, the drug can be repackaged at the pharmacy counter. And if we look at unit WAC, as you pointed out, it's important to calculate what that dosage would be an average month, which can be very tricky because obviously dosage can vary by the age of the patient, the weight of the patient, essentially the severity in which their physician has prescribed that they need a higher dosage or a lower dosage. So naturally, like when we look at WAC, at least the staff's recommendation to the board is that we use it more as a trend point to just see how that pricing over time has increased or decreased or stays the same. And then we'll have the other price points from APAC and the data call that will get into what that really costs to the stakeholders on an average annual spend for each patient, both in terms of their out-of-pocket costs, as well as the average annual cost for the payer or the healthcare system for each patient for that drug. I think that'll be a better metric.
Yep, and thank you for that, Amanda. And then Dr. Hartung, the other piece of that is that, as mentioned, when Dr. Herrick is helping us with the clinical reviews, she will also be helping us on the therapeutic alternative side in terms of standardized dosing, whether it be an oral agent that is taken daily in that regard, or an injectable, so that we hope to level set that.
Okay, perfect.
And Robert.
Yeah, Amanda, this is actually, I really enjoyed the totality of this review. So appreciate the time that it took to assemble it. But I want to understand certain elements of it. And I understand that this is, just generic data to show up to make a point. But if you go back up to your pie chart, I want to understand what I'm seeing there and what the intent is with that. Because the way I'm reading it is that you have the manufacturer discount and the PBM discount. Is the PBM discount is the rebate value? Is that what you're getting at? Or is it a discount that they would reimburse a drug for?
A great question, Mr. Judge. So when we did the data call, we had carriers fill out the number of discounts and rebates. So it was price concessions across the board. So that included sometimes discounts, sometimes rebates. They reported that everything that they received from manufacturers, from the PBM. We also had a section for estimated for 2022 in the case that they were projecting to get those rebates back, but they hadn't arrived just yet in their data set. And then we also had a section for other, which was a bit of a catch-all. There they could have included things like patient assistant programs, but anything else that we hadn't factored into in our categories. And so the pie chart would then display kind of where the percentage, when you look at that total cost of the drug that was reported by the carriers, and then like aggregated across the group, how much of that was not discounted, how much of that was from manufacturers. Based on what I've scouted out so far from our carrier report, the data call, I have seen a very wide range for some of the drugs, which when we do the reviews and we present, you'll see a stark contrast where some of the drugs are heavily discounted, some of the drugs are not, and then also to the source of where the discount is coming from to provide that context.
Sure. Yeah, helpful, thank you. I think from a clarity perspective, and this is, I think is getting from where we're starting from, and Dr. Hartong's point, where we start with WAC, because that's where everything begins. But when you get out to a pharmacy, while they might buy at WAC, they sell at AWP. And if this is actually getting down to what does it cost a patient, what does it cost a payer, you have to look at the world in AWP land. And that's not a manufacturer discount. That's really a discount that's paid for the drug, irrespective of the cost of the drug to purchase. And so I think a manufacturer discount to me is a little misleading or hard to understand. If you're really trying to show the discount amount as the discount of the purchase price of the drug, not the selling price of the drug.
Mm-hmm. Noted. Yeah, we can add clarity in the report.
Okay.
Robert, to that point, if I then thank you so much, Amanda. Robert, would you put forward a specific thought or recommendation of clarity on this?
Yeah. So if we look at the totality of the pie to be a drug's AWP, then the price it's paid ultimately is going to be a function of a retail discount which would be what the blue space would be in my thinking about it. And then concessions, which would be the green and gold section. And so the amount not discounted is really kind of what the actual revenue is that is in the supply chain.
Sure. Let us take that back in the most respectful and non-committal way in context that we do not have a license with Hearst Publishing or First Data Bank or any affiliation with them at this time. So that would likely be the rate limiting step in us being able to do this, but duly noted, and we will see what we can do.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, everyone. And Ralph, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you for your great work on making this template what it is. Really appreciate that effort. So thought it was important to talk for just a couple minutes about the construct of affordability reviews and deeming of affordability to who or to whom. And we'll get into this in the January meeting as we tee up these affordability reviews. But I do want to note that statute is permissive that the board can use an either or both approach when determining the review of affordability in terms of the individual using the drug for any given disease state or the healthcare system, which in context is something that we all pay for through premiums, employer contributions, if that's how you get your healthcare insurance, individuals buying insurance on the exchange themselves, co-pays or deductibles, or our taxes for support of government-sponsored healthcare programs. Or C, both the individual and the healthcare system. So finally, these approaches need not be applied uniformly across any given drug or insulin product for that matter. Just to set the stage for what the scoring rubric will be, the scoring system for board members will be based on a simple 5-point Likert scale that members will be able to vote on specific to the affordability challenges. Well, again, for consumers, for the healthcare system, or for both, that will be presented as an agree strongly, agree, neutral, disagree, or disagree strongly format. Those votes will be tallied for final determinations of affordability and reported to the legislature in that format. So did want to provide that context. Happy to provide any additional information or discussion on that, or also happy to pivot into the public comment process that I think, Robert, this will address some of your previous questions. So I'll pause and see if any hands go up. All right, seeing none. Melissa, if I could ask you, I think, yes, thank you so much. So I'm going to ask for the specific attention of all interested parties to review this page in our meeting packet outlining the public comment process for affordability reviews and signing up for oral testimony. The board invites the public to provide comments about drugs under review, including comments from patients and caregivers affected by these conditions and diseases treated by those drugs, comments from individuals with scientific or medical training related to those conditions and diseases, and comments from other stakeholders identified in our administrative rule. All drug-specific comments submitted in accordance with board policy will be considered by the board in connection with these affordability reviews. Robert, kind of specifically to your point, and happy to discuss, those who wish to provide oral comments related to a particular drug during the comment process of the applicable board meeting should complete and submit the public comment form located on our website at least 24 hours before the meeting at which a particular drug is reviewed. The meeting time allocated for public comment will be limited to allow the board sufficient time to conduct a thorough and complete discussion and review of the specific drugs on the meeting agenda. And most specifically, Robert, I think this addresses one of your questions. For this reason, it is recommended that those wishing to submit more extensive or detailed public comment do so in writing. With that said, specific to note to manufacturers, and has mentioned at the previous meeting. No trade secret information should be included in public comment or manufacturer submissions, and all public comments and manufacturer submissions will be posted to the PDAB website for public review. So to that point, and I'll only speak to the January meeting, you all can see what the subsequent timelines are for that. But the January 17th meeting, the deadline for general written comments will be January 14th. The deadline for signing up for oral comment will be at the board meeting will be January 16th, the day before, and the deadline for written comments as it relates to specific drug reviews will be January 8th. To that point, staff is prepped, ready, and able and willing to turn that information around in coordination with Dr. Herrick, working with us to populate and complete the totality of each individual review template. And it will be the expectation, candidly, of all board members to come prepared to review that information. I'll note that I think as part of the engagement letter that was executed with you and expectations as individual board members from the governor's office, that an average estimated time commitment for these engagements as seated members is, I think, 10 to 12 hours a month or thereabouts. So that's going to be the ask of you as board members collectively to make that commitment and to come prepared and reviewed, and to come with open minds and to receive all public comment and give it its due credence. So happy to take questions or feedback from board, but conveyance to you that all is the expectation of you as seated board members, as confirmed by the legislature, the Senate, and appointed by the governor. So happy to take questions. Otherwise, I think if we would move on to the next segment, but I'll pause there because I know that was a lot. All right. Chair Patterson, not seeing any hands from the board. With your permission, I think we'll move on to the recommendations part of the agenda item for the legislature as part of our board mandate.
Yes, please do. Let's pull out the recommendations and get to that.
Thank you. And Melissa or Courtney, whoever's driving, if I can ask you to blow that up on screen a little bit more for the benefit of everyone with us today. Thank you so much. All right, I will provide a quick context and introduction for this, and then I will hand off to Courtney to walk us through the rest of the discussion. So as it relates to this, I do want to remind the board that our mandate from the legislature is to make concrete and tangible recommendations for legislative changes necessary to make prescription drug products more affordable in this state. To that point, I'm going to ask that as we review these potential recommendations, that be the question you ask yourself. Does this recommendation propose action that would make prescription drugs more affordable in this state? To that point, just a brief word about pharmacy reimbursement, as that is in fact one of the pending recommendations. I want to remind the board that we are about to embark upon this major effort to develop an implementation and operational plan for upper payment limits that will include an analysis of potential savings or cost of implementing that plan with respect to, among other groups, pharmacies. In fact, they are called out in statute, as you all are aware. So do please keep that in mind as we move through this process and vote. Pharmacies will play an important role in developing an upper payment limit methodology. With that said, I'd like to hand off to Courtney to lead this discussion and review. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ralph. Melissa, if you can show the first recommendation. So first I want to thank the board for feedback, reading it, reviewing it, and letting us know of any updates to it. Just some simple language that Chair Patterson had recommended to identify the groups that did the presentation that also help support these recommendations coming forward. So the first recommendation that was discussed last month to be put in the report was to lower the insulin copay limit to $35, or decouple it from the inflation index, which has shown to be increasing the price of insulin at this point. When the OAR 743A was originally adopted, it the inflation CPIG was associated with it, and now it's looking to be about $85 for the 2024 year due to that inflation risk. So the suggestion from the American Diabetes Association was to kind of follow more closely with the recommendations from the Medicaid Medicare program, where the copay maximum is placed at $35, and or to remove the copay from the consumer price index. So I want to kind of open this up to some feedback or suggestions on the board. If you want to continue to pull this forward, or if you want to go through the rest of them and then come back and identify each one of them individually as to carry forward. Yes, Robert.
I think we ought to take each one as it is and move through them sequentially.
All right, starting with that recommendation, with the information provided or from knowledge within your specialty, what is the recommendation for this? Do you want to push it forward in the letter, Dr. Hartung?
I mean, I think this is fine. This makes sense. I guess I'm curious. I mean, also linking it to CPI in a normal world makes sense too. And with, when we don't have 9% inflation. So I guess I'm wondering what the counterfactual would have been if it was linked to CPI and we had 2% inflation, like what do we know what would have ended up at by today's date? Would it still been $60-50? I don't know. I don't mean to put you on anyone on the spot.
Sure.
So
Sure.
I've support advancing this one regardless.
Okay. No, very fair question, Dr. Hartung, and I don't believe we have an economist at our disposal to answer that, but a very fair question. Don't have an answer, but appreciate
I think
that.
one of the things to remember about legislative priorities is that oftentimes what is firstly initiated is that we are just trying to get to kind of the resolutions, and then from there we can get into some deeper delve information. But I think the idea and the concept is that to make a recommendation and then say it is up to the legislator, as this committee has often done, to then get into the weeds and then figure out the when, the where, the why, and the how they will then weigh all these. So I think that's just something that we should remember when we're going through our recommendations.
And thank you, Chair Patterson. Let's hear from Dr. Burns and John Murray in no particular order. Not sure whose hand went up first. And Robert, if you have more, please keep yours up. If not, okay. Let's do Amy, John, and then Robert.
Well, I'm quick. I think we should push this forward.
I also am quick. I agree. It's going to have an impact on patients at the counter every day.
And I'll be maybe the troika here. The thing I think we as a board have to just kind of recognize in the insulin space is it's choppy water. There's a lot of change going on. But then I'm aware of other states having moved the cost share to $35 for patients and members, and given just the importance of that drug to sustain kind of a healthy lifestyle, we got to remove affordability as an issue. So I promote going forward with this too.
And thank you for that, Robert. Chair Patterson, if no other discussion, which of course we're certainly happy to entertain, if you would kindly ask the board for a motion.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a motion from this for recommendation number 1 to be moved forward?
I
I'll make-
so moved.
I heard 2 people at once.
I'll make the motion.
All right.
And I'll
Motion by
second.
Amy, seconded by Robert, I believe.
John.
John. All right. Wonderful. Call the roll.
Richard Bruno,
Aye.
Amy Burns.
Aye.
Daniel Hartung,
Aye.
Robert Judge,
Aye.
John Murray. John Murray.
My apologies. Aye.
Thank you. Chair Akil Patterson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Let's go to question 2, then open for discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair Patterson. So the second recommendation is to change Oregon statute language regarding the substitution requirements for biologic products and biosimilars. We have received a handful of public comments for this particular recommendation. I hope that the board members had an opportunity to read each one of those. They're fairly insightful. But again, this comes down to the board providing the recommendations to move it forward. If you feel this is going to be helpful in impacting the affordability of drugs in Oregon. Is there any questions or clarification needed for this before opening it up to further discussion? Dr. Hartung?
Yeah, I have some concerns about this recommendation, and need some more clarity about what we actually specifically have recommended. I did review the comments from stakeholders, and I just want to make sure what we're recommending. And I realize that our recommendation still needs to be, it's just a recommendation, but what we're recommending falls within the scope and kind of the parameters of what is appropriate medical care. So, I think that I'm all for trying to push for biosimilar and in particular interchangeable biosimilar adoption. And so I think we need to be within the the parameters of kind of, what the FDA has, designated as interchangeable biosimilars when we start making these recommendations. Did we, in our recommendation, is it that basically any biosimilar can be interchanged, or does it have to be an FDA designated interchangeable biosimilar? That's my key question. And if it's any biosimilar, I suggest that we maybe modify a recommendation that it kind of falls within the scope of those FDA designated interchangeable biosimilars.
Yeah, so current statute language indicates an FDA has determined the biosimilar is interchangeable with the prescription biologic. So I don't think we want to be changing that. I think a big component is to ensure that the correct definitions are under our statute that follow similar to the FDA's statute, which is that 42 U.S. C-626 has the very specific definitions for biosimilar and then interchangeable biosimilars. So, and that definition for biosimilars is not in Oregon statute, just the interchangeable biosimilars is. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying, like the tone of the letters that we received basically imply that we are recommending that both interchangeable and non-interchangeable biosimilars could be substituted. And so I just want to make sure that what we're recommending is just the interchangeable biosimilar. So
Yeah.
I don't know if
Sure.
others can
Appreciate that.
comment on this. Maybe I'm missing
let's-
something.
Yeah.
Let's
I
welcome
think what we
those
also need to
comments.
recognize, again, it goes back to the recommendation is that we are looking at the statute regarding the situation of requirements for biological products, biosimilars, And then again, we go back to what does that look like? That would ultimately be up to the legislature and the organizations who are then going to present information, robust testimony, deferred information. There are going to be a lot of legal counsels that will then be involved in. We are accepting the recommendation and saying we agree that this will directly support and help people at the counter. All right, so that's where our focus should be, is to help direct support those individuals at the counter and those who are experiencing or going into or experiencing large differentials in the drug pricing. But ultimately, how these legislations are enacted and what they will then be curtailed towards should be that responsibility of the legislator, not of this committee.
And if I may, Chair Patterson, as we go to Dr. Burns and John, I think stated a different way in response to what Dr. Hartung said. If this recommendation is to go forward, it's really deference to the legislature and safety first, not safety third. To that point, however, final legislative language or intent would be adopted if the legislature chose to accept this recommendation would be in recognition of that. So consistent with spirit and intent, I want to note that staff is not making a hard sell for or against this recommendation, wanting to really just prepare you for a decision. So if we maybe go in that same sequence of Amy, John, and Robert again.
Actually, Ralph and Chair Patterson, you kind of, no notes. That's what I was going to say. So we're all good.
Yeah, my only concern was that I want to be therapeutically responsible as far as what we're recommending to the legislators. Interchangeable biosimilar is important to me as a pharmacist to make sure that it's therapeutically responsible to do that, to make that substitution. And the points made by the stakeholders, I take to heart. And so as long as we address that in our recommendations to the legislature, I'm fine.
So John, if I may, thank you for that. We would, and I'll note that we will only be recognizing board members to speak, as I am seeing other hands going up at this time. But board members, and John specifically, if we are to take this forward based on calendaring, we will need to workshop this on screen right now, which staff is certainly prepared to do. If there's a word tweak or adjustment here or there, we certainly could do that at this time. Or if it is wholesale of great concern to you or the totality of the board, then that probably should not move forward, but deference to all of you. Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, so, I do think the current statute could use some updating and clarification. Because I do remember when we went through this 5 years or so ago, maybe 6 years ago, and there was a lot of discussion about interchangeability versus biosimilarity. The legislation ended up kind of being less focused on the biosimilar side and more focused on interchangeability side. So I think I'm supportive of what this is intending to achieve, but I also want to make a comment that, we are giving some color on the recommendation in this write-up because we're not recommending OCAP's suggestion wholesale because they made some recommendations on, publishing information on the Board of Pharmacy's website, as well as notifying patients or removing a requirement for notifying patients. I believe that's what we said. Anyhow, we're being selective in what we're putting forward to the legislature based upon the recommendations we got from the public. But in spite of that, I think it's a worthy thing to look at and recommend.
And Dr. Burns.
Yeah, I would like to see this move forward. I'm not opposed to doing some wordsmithing or tweaking it. I recognize the concerns that John and Dr. Hartung have raised. I still think, though, this is something that like this is a landscape that's, just increasing at all times. It's costly for the most part, for the system and for individual patients. And I think anything that we could do that could at least start addressing it would be good. So I think this is a worthwhile recommendation to put forward.
Thank you, Dr. Burns. In context that we will need to finalize and a vote for this to be memorialized in a letter to the legislature in the next week to 10 days. This is business we do need to conduct today. Is there language that you would like to propose or delete in real time in what you see here? And we can workshop this on screen, although I think we have a PDF up. Staff, we maybe need to be prepared to open a Word doc and have some conversation about this. Dr. Burns, anything that would be
I'm
proposed?
okay. I'm okay with the language as it is. So, but what I'm saying is I'm not opposed if we do need to wordsmith it. Like
Okay.
I would vote for it the way that it's written, but if we need to tweak it a little bit, then I'm amendable to that.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Burns. Let me then put question to board. Is there absent any wordsmithing or workshopping of this in real time right now, is there anyone that feels like that would be necessary for them to vote in support of this this recommendation as written?
So are we good on the language? What specifically do we need to move by? Sorry, my volume.
I think, sure, no problem. Chair Patterson, I think that is the question to the board. If in fact there is anyone that feels strongly that there should be some language revision on this, we should do that in real time.
Yeah.
Dr. Hartung?
I'm trying to get to the crux of what we're specifically recommending here. And so like on the next page, I mean, so the big concern from my read, and I agree, is that we're recommending that, and I realize that this is going to be, legislated and whatnot, but, I want to make sure that we're at least doing something, making recommendation that's in line with what, is clinically reasonable to do. And so we have this thing at the second to last or third to last statement, OCAP and AHIP's proposed amendments to ORS specify that the substituted biologic product must be licensed by the US FDA as a biosimilar. I mean, I think substituting or adding interchangeable biosimilar would at least alleviate that concern, that we're saying it's specifically that the substitutable one has to be an interchangeable biosimilar, not just any biosimilar.
Sure. In the spirit of safety first, not safety third, I think that's a great recommendation. Any other discussion from the board? Seeing a thumbs up from Amy. John?
No, I was just going to comment. I appreciate Dr. Hartung's suggestion, and that's the crux of the issue for me. Thank you.
Okay.
And then
you go ahead.
I also want to say they also proposed removing requirements to notify patients of substitutions, blah blah blah, which we don't support. So we think that patients need to be notified. So I think that's fine. So yeah, my only suggestion would be adding interchangeable biosimilar to the language.
Okay, and then for the purpose of submission to the legislature, would you be comfortable then with striking that last piece in your reference? They also proposed removing recommendations about notifying patients, and that in fact would not be part of our recommendation that moves forward.
So it's listed. It's listed. The board does not support those changes.
Right, but to that point, Chair Patterson, I'd like to say it moot and doesn't need to be included in the actual recommendation, because remember, these are board recommendations that the board will be taking forward.
Well,
yes. I mean, so I think, if you want to be really clear, you could say the board recommends that we amend ORS, blah, 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 specifying the, what I just said, and then we could just drop the other piece, because if we're not going to advance their recommendation, we don't even mention it, in my opinion.
Right. I share that with you, Dr. Hartung. So if
Let's
perhaps,
strike it. Yeah, let's just strike that
okay.
then.
All right, Chair Patterson, if I could, or Robert, or did you want to repeat one
I
other
was
part?
not, I was nodding my head.
Okay, great. So Chair Patterson, if I could ask you to ask the board for a motion to adopt this amended recommendation, adding the word interchangeable. Melissa,
And
if you'd be
striking the
so- and
terms,
striking the last two sentences, I believe we could carry
Yeah.
this to a vote.
So that is,
Yeah, so moved.
so moved by Daniel and seconded by Rob, or was that John? John, and then seconded by
I'll second.
Robert, seconded. All right, Melissa, call the question.
Richard Bruno,
Aye.
Amy Burns,
Aye.
Daniel Hartung,
Aye.
Robert Judge,
Aye.
John Murray,
Aye.
Chair Akil Patterson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
And thank you, board, and Courtney, if you'll continue with discussion on number 3.
All right, thanks all. So for number 3, this is regarding the expanded PBM reporting requirements for more transparency. We earlier this year under Senate Bill 192 was already granted some requirements from PBMs to report to the DPT program aggregated information at a high level. However, with the review of the Oregon Secretary of State audit that was done, we received a handful of comments to expand those recommendations a little bit more via what other states are doing. So the proposal here is to, again, kind of look at what else can be asked from pharmacy benefit managers for collection of data to kind of make things more transparent through their business practices and pricing models. So I will turn it back over to the board to have a discussion if they feel that additional criteria should be suggested to legislators to continue expansion of those transparency requirements for PBMs. Yes, Robert.
Yeah, there's 2 pieces to this recommendation. One is reporting of additional information for PBMs, and I think we could all benefit from greater transparency and kind of sunlight in that area. The other part is, how to handle rebates, and I struggle a bit with that recommendation, especially at point of sale, because that's really a function of benefit plan designs. For if you have low copay plans, then point of sale rebates makes no sense at all. So, by mandating in law, I think you're taking away an ability to have plans provide flexibility in the benefits that they offer to their members. And of course, it's been an argument that's gone on for a long time about, who benefits from rebates, the entire population or the individuals taking the drugs. So I struggle with that, with standing behind that recommendation.
Dr. Burns.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Robert on that one. I would remove the section about the additional recommendation, not because it's not necessarily a good recommendation, just because that's not what we're saying here. We're saying expand the reporting requirements for more transparency. So I would take that out. And if that's something that we want to look at in the future, then that would be a separate thing.
I guess I'm wondering which part are we taking out again, Dr. Burns? You're suggesting and Robert taking out rebate information reporting?
No, well, so it's just reporting requirements for more transparency. And then in the first paragraph, it says, however, they provided additional recommendations to require that rebates, discounts, and any savings be passed on to patients at the pharmacy counter. And that's what I'm saying. We should just take out that section because that's not about reporting requirements for more transparency. That's that's an entirely separate thing that we could look at, but that's not part of expanding PBM reporting requirements for more transparency.
Okay, thank you.
Where did this recommendation come from, Melissa? Or,
So
sorry, Courtney.
okay, so this recommendation came from various stakeholders, including Chronic Disease Coalition, Johnson and Johnson, Pharma, and the International Cancer Advocacy Network, who all supported some of the recommendations that were in the OSS audit report. And that sentence that wants to be struck is the stakeholders provided addition. The stakeholders did, that's what they were kind of recommending for the transparency, is to require that rebates, discount, and any other savings negotiated by PBMs be passed on. So collecting that information in some capacity to expand the transparency that's already being collected under 192.
And then Courtney, if I may, and I suspect some board members may be more attuned with this than I am, but many folks may have also seen and noted that a PBM bill did pass out of the U.S. House of Representatives yesterday or the day before. It is headed to the Senate. What it would look like on the other side if it is to move out of the Senate is, of course, TBD. But I do want to note that for board members.
Okay. I only asked where the recommendation came from because I think that is part of what we are tasked to do, is to make recommendations on behalf of communities that are being impacted by this. And if stakeholders are saying that this is language that they preferred that would address this subject matter, that's why I'm hesitant to want to remove it for that purpose. I mean, honestly, that'd be the only reason, is that there are people who have attached themselves to this. So that was the thought process that I was having.
No, Chair Patterson, absolutely appreciate that and respect that, but also recognizing that at the end of the day, this is a board recommendation. While we sought input from the public, and we appreciate those that did submit and spend the time doing so, but at end of day, it is board decision, board prerogative, and board recommendation, and ultimately board decision whether we as a board, you specifically as board, us in staff of support of you as board making that decision as your recommendation.
Sure. I guess so. We're really asking that the information be collected, not so much taking action with the information. Is that basically correct? In other words, we get the information that there are rebates, but we're not willing to go forward with that last statement and say require that the rebates or any savings negotiated by PBMs be passed on. Is that basically it? We're wanting to strike that so we don't take action. We don't suggest action with the information, right?
Well, I would argue that it seems like that's tacked on. So if the recommendation is that there needs to be more reporting requirements for transparency so that you could make a further recommendation like that, you would need that transparency to look at the reporting to make that recommendation. Why would you make a recommendation before you looked at the more transparent reporting?
Robert?
Yeah, I'm lined up where Dr. Burns is. This may be a worthwhile goal, but I think as a board, I'd like to know more about it before we make a recommendation and just jump off the cliff.
Is there any other feedback? I'll just say that hearing the conversation, it makes logical sense to strike it. And so would there be an appetite to move this motion, continue this recommendation forward if we were to strike the information around the counter patients at the pharmacy counter, and prohibits steering individuals to use PBMs owned and affiliated pharmacies? Would that be what we would like to strike?
Yeah, that last full sentence.
Okay.
And Melissa or Courtney, whomever is driving for the benefit of everyone with us today, could you, and I may defer to Dr. Burns to say out loud specifically, but could you just hover and highlight the sentences that she's referencing? And Dr. Burns, is that correct? And Robert, that the discussion would be to remove that more than 18-word sentence there, to remove that sentence and continue with this for approval, or to reject this recommendation in its entirety. It sounds like that's the decision point for conversation prior to a vote.
That would be what I'm suggesting we remove.
Okay, Chair Patterson, if no other discussion, I would invite you to ask Dr. Burns to make a motion to that effect. If that motion were to be rejected, I think subsequent discussion would be whether to remove this recommendation entirely.
Sure.
Dr. Burns,
I'll make the motion, sure.
you'd have to
And
make
I
the
will
motion.
second the motion.
You'd have to make them. So Dr. Burns, for clarity's sake, you'd have to make the motion in which what you're motioning for. So not the motion to approve, it's the motion to amend. So you gotta say your motion to amend.
Apologies. I make the motion to amend.
All right. Motion to amend is on the table. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, call the question. Melissa.
Richard Bruno,
Aye.
Amy Burns,
Aye.
Daniel Hartung,
Aye.
Robert Judge,
Aye.
John Murray,
Aye.
Chair Akil Patterson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Motion to amend is a pass.
And
Right.
Chair Patterson, if I may, so that we dot every I and cross every T, if this has now been accepted, I believe it would be appropriate for a vote whether to formally accept this
Accept the motion.
amended
Yep.
version. Thank you.
Gotcha. Is there a motion now to accept the amended version?
I move to accept the amended version.
All right.
A second.
Seconded by Dr. Spare. I'm sorry, Rebecca. Melissa, call the roll.
Richard Bruno,
Aye.
Amy Burns,
Aye.
Daniel Hartung,
Aye.
Robert Judge,
Aye.
John Murray,
Aye.
Chair Akil Patterson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, plowing through. Courtney, if you would be so kind to lead us through number 4.
Yeah, so the last recommendation was identified by the board last month as provisional. Kind of determining if this is worth taking forward. The board wanted more conversation around this recommendation. This recommendation is to require payers to reimburse pharmacies at cost, kind of adopting a cost plus fee reimbursement model. There is the original language, and then in the red line language is a kind of a different version of the language suggested by John to consider. So there may be a couple different votes regarding either amending to a certain language or amending the original language to fit what the board's recommendation is, or deciding if it needs to go forward or not. So I'm going to turn over to the board to have a discussion if you want to carry this recommendation forward, and then in what language capacity do you want to do that one?
And Courtney, if we can, I'd like to offer opportunity for those that submitted these revisions to offer their comments or feedback first. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that as well.
Thank you. I'm going to speak as a community pharmacist who owns independent pharmacies. And so you'll notice that my comments are jaded in some respect. Just yesterday in the Oregonian, there was an editorial called "The U.S. Pharmacy Industry is Crumbling and Here's How to Fix It." And it talks specifically about pharmacies going out of business. And then I also read in the stakeholder comments, just from the Drug Price Transparency Board meeting, his term market disparities in the information presented from different perspectives in the drug delivery system. My concern is that while I'm fiercely independent, and I believe that I should be able to take care of myself as an independent pharmacist through the practice of good business practices, we have come to the point in America where we have allowed, and I'll just call it out, PBMs to be almighty, in my opinion. And I have a problem with not taking action. When I am suggesting doing this and changing the language, from saying there's likely to be this damage or there's likely to be this cost increase, I am saying I'm not saying there won't be, but my question or my point is, maybe there is in the short term. However, I think it needs to be a needed first step to shore up the loss of healthcare providers, pharmacies in these underserved areas, whether urban or rural. If we don't take some steps, 32 pharmacies, I put in my language down below, 32 pharmacies went out of business this year. How many more times, how many more can we support, or how do we serve our customers, our patients, when another 32 go out next year? And I mentioned it, I need, as a pharmacy owner, I need more than rhetoric. The rhetoric that goes on with the market disparities leads to an ominous quagmire, otherwise known as the description of pharmaceutical disbursement in America. Quagmire leads to misunderstanding or lack of understanding, which leads to inaction. Inaction leads us right to where we are today. We, in my opinion, need to take some concrete step. The legislature needs to step in, and that's what I was commenting about. I'm fiercely independent and generally against these kinds of things. But we have, in my opinion, a gorilla in the room in America that controls everything from the cost of the med to rebates to where the rebates go. There's a reason they're in top Fortune 10 company, all three of the big PBMs. So I am hoping that this board would take a brave step and say, we need to change the way that pharmacies are getting paid, as a first step only. Meaningful PBM changes need to happen, and I think they will. We're already suggesting getting more information. Senate bill, was it 192? We're going to get information that's going to further this process along. But how many more pharmacies do we have to lose? How many more patients have to drive? I've served patients that drive an hour to get to my pharmacy, and I cover 3,000 square miles. My pharmacies alone in Morrow, Gillum, and Wheeler counties. How many more? I'm the only one. So yes, we're supposed to work to decrease the cost of medications to our patients. And this first step that we might suggest may not be the one that does it, but the next step 2, 3, and 4, should we be so brave as to tackle them once we have more information, will. And that's why I think we need to shore up the loss. We're losing providers terribly right now. So I would encourage us to maybe adopt different language and move forward with it. Thank you.
Hey, Ralph, is legal counsel available? Are they here?
I believe they are. I do see Dr. Burns has her hand up, and I do
Okay.
want to note that staff, our role is ultimately to support whatever decision the board lands on with this. I don't know that we would have ability to draw on legal counsel for anything specific, but if you'd like to ask Chair Patterson, we can certainly see if someone is available.
Yeah, I just want to see if they're available real quick to ask, because I think on this one we may need to have and John, this is not a shot at you, we would need John probably to abstain from this vote.
Do we have
That's why
Pramila?
that's
We
why I
have
wanted to.
Pramila or Jake with us, an ability to bring them on.
Yeah.
And that ultimately may, to that point, also not be within their sphere.
Yeah, that's where I was going to ask.
I do see Jake with us as counsel for the board. Jake, is that anything you're able on the fly to offer? Or I do see Pramila's hand up, if we can give Pramila audio.
Pramila does have the ability to put your audio on. Pramila, you should be able to unmute.
Sure, yeah. I'm not sure if I understand the question, but if this is legal advice to the board, we should be doing it in executive session.
That's what I'm saying. So I think I would like to take 5 to move to executive session real quick to receive advice from council.
Sure. Chair Patterson, let me just do a check. If I could, let me do 2 things. Let me do a check with Melissa that we have the mechanics in place to do that at this time, as I don't believe we had anticipated going into exec session. I also want to make sure at whatever point in this conversation we recognize Dr. Burns, who's had her hand up as well. But Melissa, do we have that capacity today as we have not intended?
Are you available to come into executive session?
I could.
Talking about, I really hope we don't.
Yes,
Chair
I
Patterson.
could open a meeting room. It will take a little more time because I don't have the spreadsheet ready, but yes, I could move
Okay.
people over.
Yeah,
to
if
a
we're able to
meeting
do
room.
that, and then we'll continue the conversation here. So we'll go with Amy.
Yeah,
Ready?
I have a quick question for John. So reading through this, is this intended to be for all insurance plans? So commercial, Medicare, Medicaid, or is this just directed at the Oregon Health Plan?
It can be just to the Oregon Health Plan to start with. I think the evidence is going to show that it should expand beyond that. But if it was a recommendation, I mean, what is the ERISA agreement? Does the ERISA agreement prohibit it going to the commercial plans or the Part D plans, for example? It may be that it's only able that legislators can do that in with the Medicaid programs. I don't know. I
just want to be clear, because it's not super clear here that that's what it's saying. So,
well, in my opinion, it would be best if it was applied to all, but I'm willing to negotiate or think otherwise, listen to ideas.
well, I mean, you proposed this, so I'm just asking for clarification.
Yeah, all of them.
Robert, Judge, and then we'll circle with Melissa if they have the hydraulics in place to move to a brief executive session.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. Then John, I feel strongly about the points that you're making, having kind of spent a lot of time in the community pharmacy space before getting into the payer space. But this always feels like a blunt instrument approach that may help individual pharmacies continue to sustain themselves in communities, but also could have unintended consequences in terms of adding costs to people's out-of-pocket costs when we look at kind of generic prices overall, and could cost the system, whether it's OHP or carriers, a fair amount. So, but not blind to the issues that we have in the creation of pharmacy deserts. There may be more creative ways to approach that. And I know that OHA is trying to look at critical access pharmacy definitions and how do you do that. So I struggle with this recommendation. And that's why to me, it was a provisional deal, because I think it wasn't ready for prime time in my headspace for this next legislative session.
Let's give John opportunity to respond to that, and we'll check in with Melissa following that to see if we have mechanism in place to go to exec session that we will hope to keep brief. And then broadly to folks with us today, as the vote was earlier to extend meetings, I believe necessity to apply that today to this meeting, as I know we've got, I think, 8 or 9 folks signed up for public comment. So John, and then hopefully we can move into a brief exec session.
Thank you. Robert, I understand your concerns, and that's why I was commenting that in my opinion, this is a first step to stop the bleeding. It's not intended to be the final answer for shoring up what I consider extremely faulty pharmaceutical delivery system in America. I mean, meaningful PBM reform, in my opinion, has to include, no spread pricing, rebates that are transparent, and we see where they go, whether it's split between the plan and the patients. I'd love to see some of it actually get down to the patient. There are states that are trying this model and that have removed the PBM. And matter of fact, there's even plans floating around Oregon to try this plan, removing the PBM out of it. And let's see how it goes. And we'll see. I'm not at liberty to discuss that further, but I think, again, this, in my opinion, is just a first step. How much longer do we keep from making a first step that it's meaningful? I mean, people are having a difficult time already. We have strikes in the pharmacy now because the pharmacies aren't paid enough to employ staff to keep them without duress. And that's not even considering the patients who walk in and have to wait an hour or two to get their prescription. So I'm just trying to deal with the what I see on a daily basis in my pharmacy. This is just a first step. I know it's maybe not the first step that everybody would like to see or they feel is the be all end all, but I don't know how else to make a step toward better that's going to mean something. Thank you.
Amy, if I can pause for a moment and just do a check-in with Melissa if we're able and ready to go into an exec session.
Oh, I can get that started right now. Did you want me to open the meeting room and start
Chair
moving people
Patterson,
over?
deference to you, whether you want to recognize
We
Dr.
can
Burns first.
we can continue the conversation. Let's finish with Dr. Burns, and then let's move over to executive session,
Okay,
so that we can just get some clarity on this conversation.
Oh, yep, sorry. So I think that I saw in here, I'm sorry, I'm having Zoom issues, that's fun. That this recommendation was based off of the bill that went through in 23, which I believe is going to go back into legislation in 24. So, I mean, some of this is already going to be addressed. I have some trouble with trying to fix the system on the back of Medicaid, though. So, I mean, that's probably my own personal bias, but trying to fix the system based off of just Medicaid seems a little short-sighted to me.
and thank you, Dr. Burns. And as we do move Melissa into exec session, I will note that it is my understanding as well, although that is, of course, subject to change based on information I have, that there is intention at the legislature for there to be another bill analogous to House Bill 3113 from last session. Melissa, if you could move us to exec session, and I believe there's a disclaimer that needs to be read publicly. Is that correct as we do so?
Yeah.
Steve's going to put up a slide, but I could, if you'd like, I can summarize that disclaimer.
Let's do so for the benefit, as we do have our ASL interpreter with us today. I want to make sure that everyone has an ample opportunity to see and understand this. If you would be so kind as to read this out loud.
The board is adjourned to executive session pursuant to ORS 192.6602F. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the public may not attend. The public may stay here in the Zoom room. The board will return to open session in approximately 5 minutes. No decisions will be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, the board will return to open session and welcome the public back.
And thank you, Melissa. If you would move us to executive session.
All right, all. Thank you very much for your patience as we wait for the rest of the board to return back from executive session. Have all board members returned?
Would you like me to do a roll call, Chair?
Let's do roll call real quick.
Chair Akil Patterson,
Present.
Dr. Richard Bruno,
I think we may have lost Dr. B.
Yeah, awesome.
Dr. Amy Burns,
Present.
Dr. Daniel Hartung,
Present.
Mr. Robert Judge,
Present.
Mr. John Murray.
Present.
We
And
have a
Melissa-
quorum.
Melissa, I
have a-
did just readmit Dr. Bruno. You may need to elevate him again to a speaker or panelist role. Thank you.
Okay, will do.
And let's do an audio check real quick with Dr. B, if we may, as you do that.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. So I guess we were finishing up our discussion around the fourth and final recommendation to move forward. There was a change presented and presented to us. There were two, I believe, right? Courtney?
Yeah, so what you have is the language from the original recommendation that was brought forth last month, and then the updated language that John had provided in red.
Okay. Is there a motion from anyone here, or is there further comments needed or discussion around either one of them? If hearing none, then is there a motion to move either of them forward? So I'm not seeing a motion from anyone at this time. So I can only bear to assume, and assuming is not something that is within my nature. So I believe that right now at this time, this recommendation is not ready for prime time, and that we could potentially further table this until next month if we do need more time to kind of digest.
And just for clarification, Chair Patterson, that this recommendation letter is due by the end of the month to the legislators. So if this is not going to go forward, then we need to vote that it will not be carried forward.
So I believe, although it may not be in their recommendation letter, we can still make the recommendation at any subsequent time, correct?
Chair Patterson, without further advice of counsel, and I don't believe we have bandwidth to go back to exec.
Okay.
My understanding and interpretation of statute is that our obligation is annual, New Year's Eve each calendar year. So I believe Courtney is correct that if we do not adopt this in whole or in part today, we would not be bringing a recommendation back until the end of next December on this issue. And
Robert?
Robert, thank you.
Yeah, based upon that, Ralph, and Dr. Burns' comment earlier about 3013 being revisited and what the OSPA recommendation refers to, it would seem that maybe giving this next legislative session time to work will tell us whether this is something that, we as a board need to consider for our recommendations exiting 2024.
Well, if there is no motion, then we cannot move this recommendation forward. And so let's we just move on to the next part of our agenda.
If I may call upon council just briefly, though, as a process issue, if in fact there does need to be a thumbs up or thumbs down vote to not accept this, given it was brought forward as provisional. Pramila or Jake, are you able to weigh in quickly if we do need to take a vote, whether the formal vote, whether this is to be included or not?
Well, we had agreed to a vote on these one individually. To
Right,
move
of
forward.
which,
So
so absent a vote, it will not move forward. Is that your understanding?
It dies
Okay,
because it does not bring up the vote.
okay.
So that's it. That's
All right,
Those
appreciate that.
Robert's Rules of Order are
Gotcha.
what we do now.
All right, appreciate Chair Patterson and appreciate the rich conversation and the candid and honest conversation by the members. So grateful for that. All right, Chair Patterson, I believe may well make it on time. We have 10 minutes left for public comment. We're surrendering staff announcements at this time. So to you, please, Chair Patterson, to facilitate the public comment process.
All right, thank you. This is the portion of the agenda for public comments submitted or requested in advance. The board received 10 written comments and 8 requested to provide oral testimony. Written testimony is published on the PDAB website. As the chair, I call on individuals to provide oral testimony and ask them to state their name and organization before they begin. Melissa will be giving you controls of the camera and mics. If you do have audio and visual, we would prefer that. I am allotting 1 minute per individual to state, as there are 8. And so we will start with that list of number 1 would be Tony Sorrell Neal, Senior Director of State Affairs for PCMA. Second would be Lorraine Sandit from the Executive Director of Caring Ambassadors Program. Then the third would be Kaylin Nigen, pharmacist with Vive Healthcare. Then Leonard Freeland from GSK. Then followed that by Brian Warren with Senior Director of State Government Affairs with Biotechnical Innovation Organization. And then Lisa Bazinski with the Executive Director of Oregon Bioscience Association. Followed that with Anika Rahim with AI Artisis International Foundation for Autoimmune and Anti-Inflammatory Arthritis. I'm sorry. Then you've got Deborah McGrew from Pharma and Tiffany Welch Robinson, also with AI Arthritis. If the ones from the same organization we'll end up repeating it. If you guys are able to consolidate your statements or comments, that would be great in the sake of time. But otherwise, we would hand it over. And please remember, we are not here to comment. We're simply here to listen to the public's feedback of us. Thank you. So I'll just go through that one more time. Surreal Neal of PCMA. Tonya.
Thank you, Chair Patterson. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Patterson and members of the board. My name is Tanya Sarl Neal. I am the Senior State Director for the Pharmaceutical Care Management Association, the National Trade Association for Pharmacy Benefit Companies. As stakeholders in the PBM industry, we firmly believe that limiting tools available to employers, union, and the state to manage prescription drug spending is not the solution to rising prescription drug costs. We will oppose any policy recommendations that would restrict our ability to appropriately manage spending and control medication usage. There is simply no way to mandate higher payments and reduce costs. Real briefly, I just want to make a couple comments. Commissioner Mogrish mentioned that the federal bill passed out of the U.S. House last night. I just wanted to comment to what the two of those primary elements are. One is the codification of the transparency and coverage rule that includes public posting of negotiated rates and discounts, including prescription drugs on a drug-by-drug basis, and reporting. The second one is reporting to all clients on PBM contracting and pricing every 6 months, and only for drugs with more than $10,000 spend, and with safeguards in place to make sure prices don't get into the supply chain. So those are the two primary elements that came out of that bill. As he mentioned, it has not gone through the Senate. It is just in the first house, but we are continuing to monitor that. Also, I wanted to mention that Dr. Lawton Robert Burns published a book and testified before the Senate Finance Committee recently that was entitled Pharmacy Benefit Managers and the Prescription Drug Supply Chain: Impacts on Patients and Taxpayers. And that on December 4th, Forbes had an article titled A Practical Approach to Saving Community Pharmacies by Ike Brannon. I would encourage everyone to explore those articles and some of the options provided in both of them. We recognize the challenges this board has of exploring alternative solutions that balance the interest of stakeholders while achieving lower healthcare costs. PCMA is committed to supporting the PDAB by providing resources, engaging with stakeholders. And so please know we are here to provide any information that we can and help you along in your process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Lauren Sand with Caring Ambassadors Program.
Thank you very much, Chair Patterson. My name is Lauren Sant. I'm the Executive Director of the Caring Ambassadors Program in Beaver Creek, Oregon. And I'm actually speaking today on behalf of 25 different community organizations and people living with challenging health conditions. We have submitted our written testimony, and I hope that you guys will have a chance to read that. I know it's short on time, so I'm just going to sort of bullet point some of our points here. First off, I would like to commend you all in your survey for rating patient and caregiver input at 8.6. It got one of the highest ratings there for what you should be deliberating. Unfortunately, though, public comment is not patient engagement. And so we really ask the board to consider that and create a better process for patient engagement. For example, I get 1 minute here that I don't get to ask you guys questions. There's no dialogue here. There's no true engagement with patients. We'd like to be that help. We'd like to help you with that. We'd like for you to suggest in your letter to the legislature that a board seat be given to a patient or a caregiver. Someone can have the qualifications that you need and are asking for in health economics, but someone that's utilizing the healthcare system that's being affected by your decisions. And we would love to see that in your letter, given that you only get one letter a year to the legislature. I'd like to see that letter revised and create more patient engagement. For example, Colorado's PDAB has held 5 separate meetings for each drug class, and they had specific meetings for patient engagement. And so maybe looking at how Colorado has done this and how you can do that would be great. It would be wonderful for all of us to be able to sit down with this board and really have this conversation. It doesn't have to happen on every single meeting, but there needs to be opportunity. And so that's the gist of our questions.
Lauren, I'm sorry, you're over your minute. To keep things on time, we need to get to the rest of it. And again, so I think for process going forward, I'm going to keep track of time. If you see my hand go up, you have 10 seconds left of your comments to follow up. So
thank you, Courtney.
Yeah, next
appreciate it. And thank you, Lauren. We appreciate it. And there is currently a vacancy in the board right now. So please encourage people to apply. We would say that much. Next up is, my apologies. This is Kathleen Nigel with Vive Healthcare. Caitlin, excuse me.
That's okay. Hello.
Caitlin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Hello, board members of the Oregon Prescription Drug Affordability Board. My name is Caitlin Nguyen. I'm an American Academy of HIV pharmacist and medical science liaison with VIV Healthcare. We respectfully ask the board to remove Triomec and Triomec PD from the list of drugs subject to the affordability review for the following reasons. First, Triomec is strongly recommended by the U.S. panel of HIV experts in national guidelines as first-line therapy and the only single tablet regimen preferred in pregnancy. Triomec PD is the only complete HIV treatment approved in children as young as 3 months and 6 kilograms in weight. When it comes to HIV, there is no one-size-fits-all. Guidelines highlight the importance of individualized therapy to ensure long-term success. Majority of HIV drugs are available with low to zero out-of-pocket costs and are highly discounted beyond mandated supplemental rebates. The ADAP Crisis Task Force.
I apologize, Caitlin, your minute's up. I know this is really fast, but we got your written testimony. Thank you so much. We will review those. All right.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. We appreciate it and the work of different organizations that are being presented here today. Leonard with GSK. Leonard Freeland, sorry. Are you here?
Leonard is here, and Leonard, you have the ability to unmute your mic.
Yeah, he just needs to unmute.
Can we unmute him?
Unfortunately, we cannot unmute him. He has to unmute himself.
Okay. Leonard, if you can unmute yourself for us, please.
Sorry, Leonard, cannot hear you.
Maybe we could go on to Brian Warren and come back to Leonard.
Yeah, let's go to Brian. Leonard, let's try Brian, and then if we can get your mic to work, we'll get you to end, okay? We'll bring you back. All right, Brian.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You have 1 minute.
Thank you, and thank you for your time. I'm going to try to be as quick as possible because I know you guys are trying to get through this. Brian Warren with the Biotechnology Innovation Organization. I wanted to first thank you for modifying the recommendation on biologic substitution to limit it to FDA designated interchangeable products. As was indicated, there's no evidence to support allowing automatic substitution of non-interchangeable biosimilars, and we thank you for listening to the public comment on this. I also wanted to make some brief comments related to the affordability review process that was laid out in the meeting packet and discussed today. I think it would be great to see further clarity on what the results or the impact of the rankings for the different criteria would have. Not all of these are quantitative measures, so I don't really understand how these would all be ranked. And then also there's like net price is ranked very low, which seems problematic if you're trying to consider the actual cost on the healthcare system.
My apologies. 1 minute is up.
Okay.
We do have your written comments, and you're always welcome to submit more written comments to us. We'll review them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Leonard, we could hear you that time, so if you do have your audio ready, you can go ahead.
Thank you. GSK respectfully asks the board to remove the vaccine Shingrix from the existing subset of prescription drugs that may be selected for an affordability review. Shingrix is a vaccine used to prevent the occurrence of herpes zoster, also called shingles, in adults 50 years of age and older, and in adults 18 years of age and older who may be immunocompromised. Shingrix is an essential vaccination, proven to be more than 90% effective. And because 1 in 3 people over the age of 50 in the United States will get Shingrix in the course of their lifetime, this preventative immunization is of vital importance. The CDC recommends that all adults over age 50 receive Shingrix, as well as those over 19 who are immunocompromised. It's important to note there is no alternative, effective, or prophylactic treatment to prevent shingles in the United States. The CDC recommends Shingrix, and this was done after a review of cost effectiveness and economic assessment by the CDC's ACIP after the FDA approval. There's also no cost to patients due to the Inflation Reduction Act and the Affordable Care Act. And we respectively note that a high utilization of a vaccine is important for utilization in Oregon, and affordability review should
Leonard,
not be
thank you
based
so
on
much for your
high or
testimony.
increased utilization. And
Leonard,
thank you very
so much
much.
for your testimony. Thank you so much. We do need to move on. We did receive your feedback when they have been considered. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Leonard, again for your time. Let's go to Anika. Anika Raman.
Anika, you should be able to unmute your mic. I'm sorry for the delay there.
That works. Okay, I got it. And then my video. Okay. Thank you, Chair Patterson. Thank you, Courtney. So my name is Anika Rahman. I'm from AI Arthritis. I'm the International Advocacy and Policy Director. My feedback was more related to the process in engaging patients. Your board had ranked that it is 8.6 out of 10, making it the third highest factor in deciding what to do with drugs and advocating for patients. Although honestly, we don't feel like the process was done well. I would be happy to help with that in the future. When it comes to navigating the website and finding the registrations and understanding the deadlines, we would ask you to keep more those with disability, those aging, and immigrant community in mind when making these websites and these registrations, as well as keeping advocacy organizations and patient organizations a part of your conversation, especially patients when creating this process. We felt like there was a missed opportunity in partnering with organizations who advocate for this. So in short, just making sure the questionnaires and written comments are also considered beforehand, and also hopefully we get more than a minute to speak and not less just the last 10 minutes. But I appreciate your effort and everything you guys do. Thank you.
Thank you, Anika.
Thank you.
Oh, just Tiffany was asked to call at the end. She had an appointment she had to leave for, so she won't be speaking.
Okay, thank you very much. Deara McGrew from Pharma. Daria.
Good afternoon, Daria McGrew, State Policy Director on behalf of Pharma. Thank you all for your work and discussion today. For those who have been watching based on the experience in Colorado, I think 35 minutes or the time that's been allotted is not going to be enough. I do understand trying to meet the deadline that you have set, but I think that you'll find that that's not enough time for these discussions moving forward. We would request clarity. There are inconsistencies in your timelines. In one part of the document, you request that manufacturer and stakeholder information be turned in 3 weeks before each hearing for specific information, but then you've also highlighted stakeholder and patient feedback 9 days prior to that meeting. So please clarify which stakeholders. And also there have been errors in data up in this process so far, so we request that no vote be taken until manufacturers and stakeholders are allowed to.
Apologize, Daria. I know we're short
you.
on time. Thank you. We did get the comments, and you're always welcome to provide more for us for this clarifications. All right.
Who was next? Sorry. Now we're going to go to Tiffany. Tiffany Westrich Robinson.
She will not be here.
Okay.
Annika said she had another engagement. So we're done. That's all on the list.
That is great. Sorry. So like many people here, this committee is made up of volunteers, and we do thank you all for your time and your effort. We are trying our best to get in lunch and work around our regular work schedules. And we do truly appreciate everyone's input. That being said, as we come into the holidays, I want to make sure that everyone knows that they should be taking care of themselves and their families and doing their best to enjoy the season that we are in. I'm going to take a little bit of privilege here as chair to, again, thank you all from the bottom of my heart to be able to do this work and to encourage you all to continue to move forward in the best possible ways that you see fit. I know there are businesses and organizations and companies that are all here trying to do their best to work together. And I do implore you all to be mindful that while we are limited in some of our outreach, we are not limited in our thought that we should be doing more. Unfortunately, the laws of Oregon govern this body, and that I would encourage you all to look into those and to reach out to the committee so you can understand how those laws impact how we have to structure our meetings. So just know that. So with that, do I have a motion? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
A motion.
Seconded?
Second.
And seconded. Is there anyone that would be opposed to us adjourning? If so, by acclamation, we will adjourn. And I wish you all a wonderful holiday season. Merry Christmas if you celebrated. Happy Kwanzaa if you celebrated. Happy Hanukkah to those who are celebrating currently. And if you celebrate any other holidays during the year that we did not recognize, please know that we wish you a very, very wonderful holiday season. And may the light of whoever you see shine above. All right, have a great day.